SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to find tickets for the football games you want to see up close and in person this season. There's nothing like being in the stadium for the biggest plays of the year, and with SeatGeek, it's never been easier to get the guaranteed seats you want for a great value. With SeatGeek, you always get the best deal on every ticket because SeatGeek price compares for you by searching multiple ticket sites. Prices can vary depending on where you shop, but SeatGeek will always find you the lowest available price. And SeatGeek wants to help you get the most bang for your buck. That's why every ticket on SeatGeek is given a grade based on value. You'll immediately see any underpriced seats and be able to find the best deal to fit your budget. Plus, every ticket you buy on SeatGeek is backed by their 100% guarantee, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. Best of all, my listeners get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. To get your $20 rebate on tickets, download the SeatGeek app, go to the Settings tab, and click Add a Promo Code. Enter promo code Mike. SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. Download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code Mike today.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Tom Brady had the football goal. Great drama, middle of the night in Foxborough.
Wow, I tell you what, I thought for sure that New England was going to score. Tom Brady, as we'll get into, a couple of quarterback sneaks in those 4 plays. He's usually pretty money with his quarterback sneaks, but do nothing but give Seattle. And let me tell you, as a former defensive player, there is nothing like a goal line stand. Nothing like a goal line stand. I remember we had one against the Cardinals one time at the Vet where we were offside 3 times, so there were actually 7 plays that we stopped them inside the 3-yard line. And it is one of the greatest feelings. That is as close to a man-on-man, just nothing fancy type of a situation, and it wasn't. It was basically 3 runs, 2 quarterback sneaks, Garrett Blount up the middle, and then you try a fade to Gronkowski. There was no trickeration at all. That was just 2 really good teams, 2 great teams going at it from the 1-yard line, and Seattle got the best of them. That was fun to watch because you wondered if New England would try something different, and quite honestly, you weren't shocked when they didn't, when they just went with basic plays saying we should be able to get this yard, and Seattle said not this time.
Yeah, so as was the case in the Super Bowl and the circumstances reversed, Seattle failing to score that time, the world will forever question the play calling.
Yes, yep.
This time New England tried to do it a variety of different ways. As you mentioned, they try to sneak it. There's a play where there's a miss. I don't know if he mishandled the snap.
Well, what he said was, so there was a quarterback sneak that gained basically a yard. LeGarrette Blount tried to jump over the top on 2nd down. Great job not only with the initial hit from the front, but guys coming in from the side, grabbing the legs of LeGarrette Blount. The 3rd play is when Tom Brady lost the ball, and he said it was his fault. He said his center Andrews thought he was going straight ahead like Brady did in the first quarterback sneak 2 plays earlier, but Brady said, I went to the left, so it was my fault. He didn't know I went not the way we thought I was going to go. My fault, but they got the ball back, and they had one more play, and that was the fade to Gronk.
And so the fade to Gronk, which is the one that people were talking about through a lot of the night because there's a lot of contact in the end zone. It's Gronk against Cam Chancellor. Could you possibly ask for a better one-on-one, mano-a-mano matchup in the entire NFL right now than those 2 guys from the 1-yard line to decide the game? In the end, there's no call, Mike. Should there have been a flag?
Absolutely, positively not. And this play started before the snap even took place. And hopefully I'll break this one down a little bit later on the telestrator. It normally when you play, because what happens in those situations sometimes, if you're given too much room, instead of the fade, you get that quick back shoulder throw right over the goal line. Cam Chancellor gave Gronk all kind of room, and even Gronk said, he gave me way more room than I thought he was going to give me. And Gronk's whole, you'll hear Gronk's line, I needed to get up on his toes as quick as I could. That means basically getting his grill. I'm 6'7", 6'6", 6'7". I'm taller than everybody, so I need to get up in him so I can then outjump him. So Gronk made an effort to run at him without even looking for the ball at first, and he initiated contact. He absolutely initiated the contact. There is no way you can make a call on that, and I think Cam really kind of messed that play up before the play even started by playing off of him a little bit.
Let's hear it. Here's Gronkowski after the game.
I mean, it didn't get called. It is what it is. If it's not a PI to the refs, then it's not a PI to the refs, so play is what it is. You can't really change it. I mean, I've had problems in the past with that last year, a couple times this year, but I'm not here to make excuses to say that was a PI. So I just want to we just lost the game. I want to give credit to the Seahawks. They played a good game. It was a well-fought 60 minutes game on both sides of the ball. But, I mean, I'm not trying to get into that discussion right now.
Good. I'm glad because really if you watch that thing, in one of the things that we have said we believe has been a major issue with ratings being down is too many flags on the field, and we certainly saw our share again yesterday. That was one where there's no way they should have thrown the flag. Zero question at all to throw that flag when that offensive player, a bigger offensive player, initiates the contact on the defensive player. So that was a perfect no call.
You make an interesting point. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Last year, over 3 million drivers switched to Progressive. Call or click today. Find out if you could save. We'll find out a lot when all of the television ratings from yesterday come in. The 1 o'clock slate of games. First of all, the College Saturday, and we'll work our way through all of this. The College Saturday, unless you were a fan of Clemson, Michigan, or Washington, the College Saturday was the best college football Saturday for football watching, not only of this year, but that I can remember in a long time. So that whets the appetite. Then on Sunday, the 1 o'clock slate of games, there were a ton of really good games with some sensational finishes. Two unbelievable, the Kansas City win and the Denver win were both, I mean, the stuff that you write books about. Then in that 4:30 spot, Pittsburgh, Dallas, which we're going to get to in a second, was one of the best. I thought actually was maybe the most entertaining game of the entire NFL season. And then it went right into Seattle, New England last night, which is as good a matchup as you could ask for in every way. So if the ratings yesterday don't reflect a significant uptick, then you'll have to start asking some real questions.
Yeah, you will, because it all came post-election coverage. Now, obviously, we know there are still things going on post-election with the protests and such around the country, but that constant, what's this state going to go? What's that state going to go? Where are the candidates now speaking today? That's all over with. So, yeah, this was kind of that first standalone weekend for the NFL, and we talked already about starting with the Thursday game of Cleveland at Baltimore. Wasn't the greatest standalone game in the world to start with post-election, but you can't beat what's going on with the college football, especially Saturday, and some of the games we had Sunday. It was a great weekend.
To put a wrap on Seahawks-Patriots, it was New England's first loss with Tom Brady as their quarterback this year. They had been 4-0. It was also for Brady his first home game, throwing an interception but no touchdown since Week 15 of 2007. So the Seattle defense did a sensational job.
Yeah, they did a great job with no touchdowns. It was Garrett Blunt with 3 rushing touchdowns. In the interception, I just didn't understand it. Brady did a great job scrambling around them, threw a long ball down the field to a receiver that was double covered. I was very surprised by that, and I'm sure not any more surprised than when Brady takes a look at it and realizes what he did. But just a bad decision by him for his first interception.
Meanwhile, Russell Wilson, 348 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, all of them to Doug Baldwin, who has 3 games of 3 receiving touchdowns over the past 2 seasons. No other player has more than 1. So a huge win for Seattle as they, want to talk about an interesting week Seattle had. They play the Monday night game. Yeah. They get that crazy win against Buffalo. Pardon me. They then travel across the country to play another primetime game against mighty New England, and they find a way to get that win on the road. So that's big. That was a sensational football game last night. The game that preceded it, which was Pittsburgh and Dallas, again, for my money, was the most entertaining game of the NFL season. And our friends at AutoZone asked us to pick a player who was in the zone. Well, could you be any more in the zone than Ezekiel Elliott? Zeke Elliott in the zone, brought to you by AutoZone. When you get the right part or helpful advice you need, it helps you get in your zone. So stop into AutoZone the next time you or your car need a little something and let them help you get in the zone. Again, with AutoZone, Zeke Elliott yesterday, 21 rushes for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns, 2 catches for 95 yards and another touchdown. He goes over 1,000 rushing yards on the season. He's the third player to run for 1,000 yards in his first 9 career games, joining Eric Dickerson and Adrian Peterson. And what was fascinating, and of course his last run of the night, was the long touchdown that ends it. He went untouched on all 3 of his touchdown runs on Sunday. Now, one of them, I believe Pittsburgh allowed him to score. I genuinely believe they allowed him to score that one right after the 2-minute warning, which was 100% the right thing to do. I thought that was exactly right, and it played out to be right, because then Ben got the ball, and he did what he did. He went right down the field, fake spike, Antonio Brown touchdown.
Wow, yeah.
What a sensational back-and-forth football game that was.
Shades of Dan Marino on that one, and it was a fantastic fake, and then an even better, obviously, the throw was great. Yeah, I mean, this is – I don't even know what to tell you. This was by far the best game of the season so far. It was fantastic on both sides of the ball. You saw the stars shine brightly, even the young stars, but even the guys that had been there. Antonio Brown with 14 catches for 154 yards. Des Bryant, 6 catches for 116 yards. Jason Witten coming up with big catch after big catch, especially on that last drive. So it was the veterans, Ben Roethlisberger doing his thing as well. But then you have that dynamic duo rookie of Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott, and we keep talking about the MVPs and the quarterbacks, and then we want to bring Zeke Elliott or Dak into the conversation. Maybe this should be the first year of an offensive line getting an MVP, because that line in front of him, while they did give up a couple of sacks, what they're doing overall protecting Dak, and then with holes they're opening up for Zeke Elliott, who that's not taking away from Zeke Elliott, but watch the screen pass. Just when you, one of the things where he went untouched, watch the 3 offensive linemen downfield all getting just enough of their guy to open up a hole so that Zeke Elliott can run untouched, and then he outruns the last defenders. They are working so well together, from, as I mentioned, Dez to Witten to that offensive line. These 2 rookies, you couldn't almost ask for better weapons around you and protection up front than they're getting right now, and it is all working incredibly well together right now.
Well, here's what it's adding up to. They've won 8 consecutive games. They've scored at least 24 points in all 8 of those games. The Dallas Cowboys, who have about as good a history over from the time they came into the league, they're not an original team, but from the time they came into the league in the early 60s, they've been about as good as anybody. They've never done that before. They've never had an 8-game winning streak in which they've scored 24 points or more, not with Roger Staubach as the quarterback, not with Troy Aikman as the quarterback, not with Tony Romo as the quarterback. They've done it now with Dak Prescott at the quarterback. And I tell you what, that kid stands in. On that last drive,
yep.
And yes, you're right, the offensive line is great. But on that last drive where they had, what, they get the ball back with 40 seconds left or something like that?
I think.
But they had all their timeouts.
Had 42 seconds and 3 timeouts. I was watching it saying, well, that's all day.
Especially when they get the face mask. They've got a great kicker, so you know you're setting up for Bailey, because he is an enormously good kicker, and what a weapon that is to have. But how many times, Mike, on that drive did it look like the pocket was ready to break down, and Prescott did not break out running? He stood in there and got rid of the ball at the last second, and you're right, a lot of it felt like it was to Witten. When the money was on the line, he's finding the tight end, but he just stands in. For a rookie quarterback, that guy is tremendous.
I think that we go back to the preseason when we were talking about what we liked out of him, and it wasn't the stats. Again, because the stats, you're not going to go, oh, my God, those are the greatest stats ever, but they were pretty darn good yesterday. What was he, 22 of 32 for 319 yards? Pretty darn nice. But was his poise, that the fact, Greeny, that he has the legs and the athletic ability to move and help himself, yet he will stand in there. He'll definitely move, and that has helped him, but he will stand in there. He understands he understands the protection that he has. He understands it'll hold up, and he understands he needs to let the plays develop down the field.
So right after the game ended, and I retweeted it because I just thought it was so funny. Let me get it for you quickly here, because the question, of course, will continue about Romo. You saw Romo on the sideline in the sweatshirt yesterday, and apparently he's going to dress next week. And as soon as the game ended and the Cowboys won, Brian Billick tweeted, and I retweeted it because I thought it was so funny. And just like that, Tony Romo suffered a setback during his rehab and will be unavailable to play for at least another week, which I thought was very funny.
Absolutely hilarious.
That isn't the case, but even Jerry at this point is acknowledging you just can't mess with what they have going on.
The longer he plays like this, the more we have a chance to have another win. And everybody here wants to do only really one thing, is win. And there's nobody that would introduce any other issue or any other consideration other than do whatever it takes to win the game. So today, to be able to come out here with a win doesn't just obliterates any thought about any of the issues that you might have as to who's out on the field. This was a team that.
I hope you could hear him because there's obviously a lot of noise out there behind it. The bottom line of it is they're all getting one over to Dak, and how could you not be? If you listen, the most significant voice on this, because he doesn't have any horse in the race. You can listen to Jerry Jones, you can listen to Stephen Jones, you can listen to Jason Garrett. Prescott saying the right things. Watch the games when Aikman is doing them. Because Aikman repeatedly on the telecast yesterday said, you don't find this kind of chemistry very often. What they have going on is something that is so elusive, so hard to find in football, that when you find it, you've got to hold on with both hands. I think Aikman is trying to tell you, without saying it out loud, because he's so connected to the franchise, you would be out of your mind at this point to take Dak Prescott off the field.
Well, you would, and I'm somewhat even amazed it's a conversation anymore. Let's understand where this has gone. From preseason when Romo got hurt and Dak started playing well, there were those that immediately jumped on Trent Dilfer was one of them, said Romo's not getting his job back, and there were others like me and others who waited and waited and waited, and I think you could go along the way when more people kind of fell off, right? It was one more week, that's still Romo's job. Another week, it's still going to be Romo's job. Another week, Dak's looking pretty good here, and they're on a bit of a roll. Another week, okay, well, maybe Romo isn't coming back, to the point where now it almost shouldn't even be a discussion. I mean, I think, and I would imagine that's got to be the discussion in Dallas. I would imagine they've already had discussions in Dallas about this, and I think as hard it is for a player to understand it, a guy like Tony Romo, because anybody you try and put yourself in that situation, you're the quarterback of this team. You have been the quarterback of this team, and you feel when you come back from injury, you're still the quarterback of this team. But you can't deny what's going on right now, and you just can't kind of interrupt that right now. And it's a hard situation, but I think it's reality as well. You can't mess with it, and I can't believe there are any people left on they should still play Romo when Romo's ready to play bandwagon. I would be stunned, outside of maybe Tony Romo's family, would be the only ones that would do that. I'm trying to remember
who it was. I think it was Brian Billick who said that he would still go back to Romo. Someone said it on our show in the last week or two, and I have to believe even that is sort of slipping by the wayside.
It has to be. The last hanger-oners of that, I think, have to have fallen off, because it's been a kind of a week-by-week thing.
Look, here's the single best thing I can tell you about watching Dak Prescott. You forget that he's a rookie when the game is going on. Yeah. That last drive, he's a rookie quarterback. I mean, look at the other rookies. Look at even like a guy like Wentz, who's been very good. Wentz has been, you have to say, all things considered, he's been very good. But he makes big mistakes. Mm-hmm. Like, he makes these plays where you're like, what happened yesterday? He scooted a fumble between his legs.
Right.
But that's just a crazy thing.
Yeah.
But like big mistakes. Rookie quarterbacks make big mistakes. Where are the big mistakes that Prescott makes? In the biggest of spots, on the road, in front of the biggest crowd ever to attend a professional football game in the city of Pittsburgh. At least that's what they said on the telecast. He was flawless in that fourth quarter. I mean, flawless.
Yeah, stood in there, and he throws a very accurate throws, out routes that the ball is thrown out with wit, and the ball is thrown away from the defender. The throw he has down, the back shoulder throw to Des Bryant is ridiculous.
That one that he threw to Bryant, where Bryant sort of also curled in from the left side, and he threw it way before the break. That was a great play in the fourth quarter.
I mean, he's like you said, not only not making the mistake, but he's making the big time play. And you get aided there by a face mask. They had missed a face mask on Cole Beasley. They called it rightfully so when Jason Witten, but then it didn't matter when you bust that run straight up the gut for the final touchdown, the 32-yard run.
And then there's Zeke Elliott. Now, I have fallen head over heels in love with Derek Carr.
Yeah.
But we are a, ever-changing, adapting by the moment kind of a league. Tom Brady all of a sudden loses a game at home in which he throws a pick and no touchdowns. Derek Carr has a bye week, so out of sight, out of mind. Mm-hmm. And Ezekiel Elliott yesterday is the best player on the field by far in any game in the National Football League. Mike, I think the conversation about Zeke Elliott for MVP right now gains a little bit of momentum.
Yeah, it does. Listen, Matt Ryan, they went to Philadelphia and they lost, and he didn't have those unbelievably. Julio Jones had.
Julio Jones could feel free to hang on to a football every now and
you're
again.
Not kidding. I mean, without question. So that not their normal game there, because Matt Ryan, from the statistical standpoint, he was up there in the MVP race. And as you mentioned, out of sight, out of mind with Derek Carr. Tom Brady has the game that he has. He is playing against an excellent defense in Seattle, but they are at home, and he's Tom Brady. So I agree with you.
And the Cowboys are 8-1.
They're 8-1.
They have the best record in the league.
Zeke Elliott has over 1,000 yards rushing. Over
and how many
1,000?
receiving? I mean, where does he? Because in yesterday's game alone, he had 95 receiving yards, and he had 3 touchdowns yesterday, 2 on the ground, 1 in the air, 114 rushing yards, 95 receiving yards. He's way over 200 scrimmage yards yesterday.
Oh yeah.
What does he have receiving?
As far as receiving, he has is it
250. I'm being told.
To 18 receptions, 250 yards, and 1 touchdown. I actually thought he had more catches than that. But
okay, but
18
even so,
catches for
that's over 1,300 yards from scrimmage.
I think the rookie rushing record is Dickerson at over 1,800 yards rushing.
It is.
So I listen. I obviously, yes. To answer your question, yes, he absolutely has to be in the conversation for it, and he'll buy, like I said, his O-line some really nice gifts for that. For how they're helping him, but he is we all knew he was going to be. We all said top 5 in total yards because he can catch the ball out of the backfield and run. But he's been doing fantastic, and so we keep talking about the rookie wall. If anybody's going to hit that at some point, they're getting close to, in a couple of weeks, to where their season would normally be over in college football. That's when you see the rookies hit the wall, but. We'll see. Alfred Morris is getting some carries as well to get him some rest every now and then. But, man, he is unbelievable to watch. So is Dak. And this team, and I'll say it again, this defense, they did give up 30 points. I do give you that. But the defense is playing better than I thought. And Pittsburgh also took a little air out of your balloon about going for 2 all the time. But that didn't work well for him yesterday.
It was a bad day for that, yeah. The Steelers, though, giving up, they hadn't allowed more than 24 points in a game all season. And look, when Ben and Brown get going, they're tough for anybody to stop.
Yeah, they are.
Dallas is for real.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Let's go to Greg McElroy, who does games every single weekend for you and does a terrific job with those and analyzes the SEC and other things on the SEC network. And he joins us this morning. So after the whole thing, Greg, obviously we'll find out tomorrow night what the committee thinks, but let's start with what you think. After all the dust settled from a crazy Saturday, we know Alabama's going to be number 1. What should happen behind them?
Well, it's obviously quite crazy. In the playoff era, it doesn't necessarily matter when you lose. It just matters whether or not you lost at all. So expect those teams that you just listed. Clemson, I think they're going to drop 1 spot from 2 to 3. Ohio State, I think, moves up into the 2 spot. At number 4, I think that'll be Louisville. Louisville has played pretty well, consistent. And then at number 5, Michigan, because this was really the first true road test. And the offense stymied, and they really, I know they lost by 1 on the last-second field goal, but that was a less than inspiring performance from the Wolverines.
If basically all 3 of these teams losing, all 3 still can control whether they get to their conference championship game. So let's play it out that way. Say they all still get to their conference championship game and all win their conference championship game. Do you still look at a team like Washington as a 1-win Pac-12 team that could be on the outside looking in after that?
They could very easily, and I think obviously in large part due to Louisville. Now Louisville plays Houston this week. Houston's 8-2, and that's obviously a pretty good football team from the Group of 5. That would only boost their resume, and then they play Kentucky, who should be a bowl team in the final week of the regular season. So Louisville is the key cog, and I think personally most guys that are looking at and evaluating Louisville and Washington, they would say Louisville would win on a neutral field. That's, at the end of the day, should be the most important factor. Would Louisville beat Washington? I say they would. So, therefore, even if Washington wins the Pac-12 championship game, beats Washington State in the Apple Cup, beats USC or Colorado in the Pac-12 championship, they still might be on the outside looking in with a 12-1 record.
But here's where it all gets crazy. As a consequence of Michigan's loss, if Ohio State beats Michigan, which they are favored to do, and Penn State wins out, it is not Ohio State or Michigan that wins their half of the Big Ten.
Yeah.
It will be Penn State. According to FPI, Penn State is now the favorite to win the Big Ten East. So if Penn State beats out, if Ohio State beats Michigan, just do the math in your head. Michigan would have 2 losses.
Yeah.
Ohio State and Penn State would each have 1, and Penn State beat them
Ohio
head up.
State, yeah.
So Penn State goes and plays for the Big Ten title. Greg, if that happens, then what happens?
Oh, it's going to be crazy. By the way, you mentioned Penn State, the favorite in the Big Ten East. I would hope so. They play Rutgers this week, and then a 1-win Big Ten Michigan State team who got their first Big Ten win this past week against Rutgers. So they should win the Big Ten East. That's when it gets really tricky. Now, the committee's always said the 4 best teams. Everyone knows, or at least I assume, that Ohio State is one of the 4 best teams as it sits right now. So they would be in. I think no problem about it. What would get real interesting, however, is Wisconsin is probably going to be right there around 6. They have 2 losses to Ohio State and to Michigan, both very close games, very competitive football games. Penn State beat Ohio State. They would play in the Big Ten championship game possibly. What would the Big Ten get a second team in, the winner of the Big Ten championship game with 2 losses? If, in fact, Washington State were to win the Pac-12, which is a real possibility, or Colorado wins the Pac-12, or USC in the Pac-12. So it's going to get very dicey when it comes to, do you include a 2-loss team that wins their conference championship like a Wisconsin, like a Penn State, over a 1-loss champion or a 1-loss at-large team like Louisville, who a lot of people respect but did not win their conference championship. So we hope for chaos as people that love radio, and I love you guys, listen to y'all every morning. You love chaos if you're in this industry, and that's exactly what we have.
No, absolutely. And I just want to make one thing clear in case it wasn't. If Michigan beats Ohio State, none of that happens.
None of Michigan goes.
Michigan beat Penn State. Yeah. So if Michigan only has 1 loss, they beat out Penn State and they go.
They go.
But what we're talking about is Penn State going if Ohio State beats Michigan, and that game is in Columbus, and Ohio State is favored.
Greg, it would be difficult, don't you, if Penn State ends up winning the Big Ten, even with 2 losses, would it be difficult for the committee to put in an Ohio State team instead of them?
Right.
Knowing Penn State beat them? I mean, I know Penn State would have 1 more loss on Ohio State, but how wacky would that look? Yes, we're going to bypass the Big Ten champion Penn State and put in a team with 1 loss in Ohio State who, lost to the Big Ten champ.
That was their loss, yeah.
I mean, I just can't see that.
It would be wild. I mean, you also have to look at the entire body of work, and Ohio State, with a win at Oklahoma, which is looking better and better every single week, a win at Wisconsin, a win against Tulsa, who is 7-3. I mean, Ohio State's entire body of work, I think, would outweigh what we've seen from Penn State to this point. And then you look at that game in particular. Ohio State, back-to-back road games, had just played an emotional overtime game at Camp Randall at Wisconsin. They have 2 kicks blocked, 1 punt, 1 field goal. That field goal was returned to the house in pretty crazy fashion. Not taking anything away from Penn State, believe me. But I still think most people that evaluate those 2 teams would view Ohio State as the better team, even though the head-to-head wouldn't necessarily tell the whole story there.
This is Larry Culpepper, inventor of the college football playoff. Goes without saying that I know about a good idea or 2 when it comes to college football. And the best idea out there is to subscribe to the Championship Drive podcast in the Listen tab of your ESPN app.
We're joined in studio now. Tom Waddle is still here. And our buddy Smooth Louis Riddick is ready to roll on a Monday. How are you, Louis?
Great. Wasn't that the best NFL weekend so far?
Oh,
by far.
Yeah.
I mentioned it earlier. I needed that.
Hey.
I didn't need Bucks and Bears, but I needed Steelers and Cowboys and Patriots.
Yeah, you know what? I needed Alshon Jeffrey to play, but actually, it wasn't
was he on your
fault.
fantasy team?
No, I said yesterday on Insiders, I said, this is be a breakout game for him against the Tampa secondary that's kind of weak, kind of small on the perimeter. And
didn't work out well.
Jay does exactly what I've always said Jay always does. Which is he's just a tease, man, every week. I mean, it's just always, against the Minnesota Vikings, it was, hey, look, Cutler's back.
Well, Greeny and I were talking about the wide spectrum of.
You know what? It's so you watch that game, and I kept looking at it out of the corner of my eye, going, because I'm looking for Alshon Jeffrey to just go off, and I'm going, well, every time I see him completing something, it's to the other team.
Yeah,
and he just that is Jay Cutler to a T, and it's so frustrating.
Okay, I mean seriously. Bear talk and Jet talk.
No,
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to do
Lewis,
that. I'm sorry. My bad.
That's where you wanted to go?
I know, man. You know. I'll talk about Dallas for 2 hours if you want.
Well, there's more than just Dallas, but Chicago? Because
I
I
know,
knew
it was
the
just-
Jets were going to follow. And
It's just one of those things, though, from a pure football perspective, man. I'm sitting there going, what is going on here? that place is going to get torn up, man.
They basically lost 36-3 to a team that hadn't won at home all year long.
Amazing.
Their only touchdown coming on a Hail Mary.
I
at
have
the
so
end of
many
the
things
half.
to say, but I'm going to hold them in for my
Do it.
4-hour show
Do
later
it. So
this
go.
afternoon.
Greeny has some other stuff. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Tommy White has got plenty of Bulls talk for you coming up this afternoon in Chicago. Okay. All right. You want to start? Let's go to Dallas since you mentioned it.
man.
All right. I mean, that to me, New England, Seattle last night's a great game. It's a heavyweight fight.
sure.
And if that's the Super Bowl again, we'd all be happy. But to me, Dallas-Pittsburgh was the most entertaining game of the entire NFL season to this point.
You know why? Not for all the things that happened on the perimeter with all the exciting skill players in that game. Look, Antonio Brown will entertain you all day long. Zeke will entertain you all day long. So will Dez, Jason Witten. Great. Some of those guys are going to be Hall of Famers. But you know what? It's the 2 touchdown runs that catch my attention for Dallas late in the football game. Because if you saw a goal, like at that point in time in the game, that's when Dallas said, you know what? All this talk about us being the best offensive line, we're going to show you exactly why. Tyron Smith one play, Ronald Leary one play.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he took Ryan Shazier for a ride.
they did.
And then on the next one, it was Tyron Smith's turn. And they just started, at that point, they were snatching the heart out of the Steelers' defense. And that's what that offensive line does. Zeke is great, but you see some of those holes he's running into. I mean, these guys are literally beating other grown men to the ground and stomping a hole in them and going, look, this is what we're paid to do. This is how we're going. I mean, look, you see Ryan Shazier on a couple of those. He wanted no part of that.
Got buried
you know
by-
when guys
yeah.
slip and why they take on blocks with like half a man? Because they don't want to face that stuff up. They got tired of getting hit in the face. Mike Tomlin mentioned that. I mean, they were talking about it on the broadcast. He said, when Dallas, when it comes to like the third and fourth quarter, defensive backs and linebackers get tired of hitting Zeke. It starts to hurt. And you saw yesterday, they were like, look, I know we're in this thing, but man, these big boys are just getting a little bit tired. It's starting to get a little painful here.
I think one thing to notice when you see a great O-line, and we talk about them a lot, is on that screen pass when Zeke went untouched, 3 of those offensive linemen were downfield. And the key to watching a O-lineman downfield, does he stay on his feet?
Yeah.
You would see O-linemen at times just dive at somebody and just kind of waste themselves. But these guys stay on their feet. They're blocking smaller, more athletic people and linebackers and DBs, and they're staying on their feet and just clipping people enough or getting a hold of people enough to make a space for Zeke Elliott. So, listen, I talk about him all the time. I think that O-line and the Raiders O-line, which averages about 390 pounds, are the 2 best in the league, and you see both teams being highly successful because of it.
Yeah, we've been very critical of offensive line play
We have.
for an extended period of time, and with good reason. But you mentioned it, Mike. Arguably the 2 best teams, and I don't want to overlook the New England Patriots. And we could talk about their offensive line and the job that Dante Scarnecchia has done with them to make them a better group. But the Raiders and the Dallas Cowboys, they just road grade you, and they protect their quarterback. You put it together, it's the reason why these teams are as good as they are.
Yeah, you can ignore that position at your own peril if you want. But there's one of 2 things you better do. You either better invest in it heavily, like the Raiders have done through free agency, like Dallas has done through the draft, or you better make sure you have one of the absolute best O-line coaches that money can buy, and he better be one of your highest paid coaches on your staff, like he is in New England, like Tom Cable out in Seattle, who, as you see, now he's starting to get those guys ramped up.
Right.
Last night it wasn't about, man, these offensive tackles can't block. Man, they can't capture the line of scrimmage. Last night it was about, man, C.J. Prosise has a lot of room to work here. And that's because he's starting to get them going on. There's always 2 different ways to skin a cat, usually when you're talking about building a team. And that's how you do it. You either draft and invest heavily in it, or you get guys who will be able to buy into a system like they're doing in Seattle. But if you don't have one of those 2 things working for you in this day and age in the league, as you see, that position in particular this year, and I'm glad that it's time that we're giving the offensive line some love and or looking at other teams and saying this is where they're deficient and this is why they're blowing up, like when we talk about the Vikings. But the teams that right now we're going to talk about in January, the big men are dominating.
Yep. Okay, so let me reset here for a moment. We've focused so far mostly at Dallas, Pittsburgh, and New England, Seattle, games of the day, without question. The teams that lost those 2 games, New England, they're obviously going to be fine. Yeah. Pittsburgh, do we believe they're going to be fine? There's a little bit of discord there. Mike Tomlin's talking about it. Ben Roethlisberger's talking about they are 4-5. Now, the division lead is only 5-4, so they're sitting right there. They did have, without Ben for a period of time. I guess what I'm saying is my basic feeling is the Steelers will right the ship, and I'm using this to build up to something. But do you agree with that?
Yes,
do you agree
I do.
Pittsburgh rights the ship?
Listen, they lost to a team with one loss, the Dallas Cowboys yesterday. I think Pittsburgh, yes, in the AFC are going to be one of the top teams. They had the offensive firepower to do it. It was the defensive side of the ball that we kind of worried about, and just in seeing some of these plays. But we'll say again, they're going against the best offensive line in Dallas. They're going against a high-powered offense in Dallas, and they're not a very good defense at all. Mm-hmm. But I think offensively they have enough firepower between Le'Veon and Ben and Antonio Brown. And quite honestly, it's one of the few times their O-line was healthy yesterday. I actually looked at the starting five, and it's a starting five they really want to go with for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've missed some of their guys intermittently throughout the year. So, if you can heal up at the right time, I think they're going to be just fine.
Let me read you the Ben Roethlisberger quotes, guys. We don't have the audio, but he said, "We are undisciplined and not accountable. That's why the Cowboys are one of the best in the business, and we're not right now." When asked how they get to that point, Roethlisberger said, "I don't know. Is it players? Is it coaches? I don't know, but we need to get there quick."
Let me add to that. Remember, last week I talked about it. Le'Veon Bell tweeted this, and I can't stand when they do it. Tweeted it saying that the mistakes we're making in practice, and they're not getting corrected in practice. He tweeted that out there. So, and we've heard Ben be critical of the practice habits as well. Mm-hmm. So they have their house. They need to kind of square away there a little bit.
Yeah, for as much as the people who I know who have worked for Mike Tomlin respect his leadership and his organizational skills, there's without a doubt that's not going to resonate very positively with him. Mm-hmm. And you can best believe he's gonna tighten things up around there pretty quickly, because no coach, especially a guy like that, is going to like for some of his most marquee players kind of saying things like that about how he is running his organization. But I'm a little bit more worried about the Steelers on the football field than maybe some. I don't know if it's just a given that they right the ship here for a team that really has in the NFL. They're top 10 in terms of cap dollars committed to their offensive line. But if you watch their offensive line, you watched it a week ago against the Baltimore Ravens, and even watch it yesterday when I'm watching this game. They're not capturing the line of scrimmage like the Cowboys do, or like the Raiders do, or like Seattle started to do last night. They're not that kind of football team. Their identity is more so, let's spread you out. Let's make sure we get the ball to Le'Veon in a myriad of different ways in the passing game. Let's make sure we get it to Antonio Brown. But when they need it, they can't really punch somebody in the mouth and actually control the clock and just ram the ball down people's throats and really take control of a football game on that side of the ball. It's either Ben, Antonio, and Le'Veon, or it's one of those games against the Ravens where they totally look out of sync. And that's that team's season right now. They're up and down. And then defensively, they don't rush the passer very well. And their secondary just gets bludgeoned against premium perimeter players.
Tommy, does Pittsburgh turn it around this season?
They turn it around enough to be a conversation piece in the AFC, but I don't think they're an elite group that's going to go deep into the postseason. I know who they are on defense. They're average to below average, and they haven't made any progress. Offensively, I was impressed a little bit by the progress they made on that side of the football. They've been up and down, though. There have been games offensively like they just didn't even show up. The Eagles game was one of those games. I mean, we have never seen the wild swings with this offense that we have this year, but ultimately I believe they'll score enough points to win the conversation.
I guess that's the thing, Greeny, is when you talk about the AFC, you say maybe by attrition, because who else is there? You have
especially in that division.
Well, that's what I mean. It's going to be the winner of that division, because the way it's going now, both wild cards are going to come from the West. You're going to have a winner. You have the Chiefs, the Raiders, the Broncos. Anybody worried about anybody in the South at this point? Either the Texans or Tennessee, which are second.
Miami,
right
Buffalo?
now. Miami or Buffalo. As far as comparing to Pittsburgh, I still, at the end of the day, like Pittsburgh, but they're going to have to win that division. They or Baltimore. We'll see what Cincinnati does tonight, because at this rate, it looks like both wild cards out of the West.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I watched last night's game as well, and I thought, as much as I think of the New England Patriots, the one thought that kept resonating with me was how much better would this defense look with Chandler Jones and Jamie Collins. And I understand why they did what they did, I think. But if this Patriots team gets to the postseason and ultimately cashes out a little bit early, and it's because of their defense, there are going to be some difficult questions to be answered, aren't there?
Yeah, and Bill Belichick won't answer them. Mike and Mike, these guys in studio with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, half the cost. I've been trying to work my way to another team, and that is the team that I'm just going to give you my opinion, and then I'm dying to hear yours. Tommy, I'll start with you. I don't think Green Bay's getting back up off the mat. I watched them yesterday. They got drilled. In every way you can get dominated in a game, they got dominated by a good young Tennessee team. But that's not Seattle they're playing yesterday, and they got punched in the face and never recovered.
They were down 21-0 at the end of the first quarter. Look, they're still alive in the NFC North because the division is so bad. But outside of the division, I don't think they have any traction. I think there are some serious injury issues that you have to address. You don't have a healthy running game for a number of reasons. The offensive line has been a bit in flux for some time. James Starks was back yesterday, but Eddie Lacy hasn't been available. No Clay Matthews Jr., so the pass rush is affected, and that secondary has been decimated by injuries. They can't stop anybody at this point.
If you talk about a football team that right now seems as though there's something going on behind the scenes other than what's going on the football field, that's the one. They look like they have no soul right now. They have no real identity. On offense, Aaron just looks exasperated. Every play looks like playground ball. It just, every play looks like Aaron drops back. It's not there, run around. And then, he just has that look on his face that you see on the TV here where he sometimes just looks disgusted about, where am I supposed to go with the football here? A lot of their statistics earlier in the year as far as how they were as a run defense, you can tell that you needed some context with those because yesterday they got bludgeoned in the run game. The secondary's getting beat up, and they've had some players that have been out. Pass rush is just not getting there. I'm with you, Greeny. I think that they need to reset this offseason in a number of different ways. And I'll say this, though. In the AFC, there's one team, look, I have been super, super, super hard on the Dolphins because after they had played that Tennessee football team down in Miami, I'm sitting there going, you can go ahead and cash this season out for them. They may need to tear this thing up, too. Why did they get things going? That offensive line all of a sudden came together. The left side, Brandon Albert and Laramie Tunsil started dominating people. And Jay Ajayi, all of a sudden you're going, Jay Ajayi looks like Ezekiel Elliott with his running style. He looks like Melvin Gordon. These young big backs that are one cut downhill in the fourth quarter, I don't want to hit you type of runners, they're dominating the league. Miami's one of those teams that you better keep an eye on.
Yeah, those running backs wear on
That's
you.
right.
By the
You better
end of
keep
the
an
game.
eye on
To
them.
your point, I'm with you. I think Green Bay, there is just something missing there. They just, because of injuries or whatever, they don't have the talent anymore. They just don't have the talent to make the plays. It seems like Aaron Rodgers completely looking for Jordy Nelson first and everybody else after that. You want to go through injuries. You want to say they're just not good enough right now. But I am with you, and I also think internally there's just something not right in that locker room right now.
It feels like a change.
It does.
We don't sit here calling for people's jobs, but every once in a while, it's a bad feeling. Been there a long time. It feels like it may be time to start over. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Winning word in 5 minutes. We're going to give you the word, the ways to enter. You're coming with us to the college football championship game in Tampa. Mike? Did the Carolina Panthers take a knockout punch yesterday?
I think they did, because I thought to myself,
what a loss
man,
that was.
They can get back into this thing if they get a win, especially with Atlanta losing in Philadelphia. They can sit there. Atlanta would be at 5 or at
6-4.
Right, they're at 4 losses now. Carolina will only have 5 losses, so they could have been right there.
And it was there. Cam is dabbing, and
he absolutely
him.
is. We keep talking about teams being in it because the division's weak, and this is another one of those with Atlanta coming back like we kind of feared they may. Tampa Bay so inconsistent, and the Saints. I mean, the Saints have surprised me a little bit, though. They learn into losing on these extra point 2-pointers that they're giving up. But I'm with you about Carolina. I think that was the knockout blow to them. They were in this game, a home game. I thought they were going to get this one squared away. The Chiefs, the Chiefs just rise from the dead more slowly and consistently than any other team I've seen.
They did this without an offensive touchdown.
Yeah.
The Chiefs did not have an offensive touchdown.
How did Carolina lose that game?
Yeah.
I saw all of that. How did they lose that game?
You know what? It's those. We talk about these things when you hear some of the best coaches talk about the fact that in the end, look, the NFL's really set up this way for you to get to like minute 58, minute 56 of a football game, and then see who can kind of like bear down and do what they need to do in order to win a football game. Whether that's get a turnover, execute in the red zone, kick a game-winning field goal. The Chiefs stay in it, and they keep fighting, and they're the most They win in the most ugly ways, blue-collar type of way that you could possibly win.
You want to talk, I mean, defensive touchdown in the fourth quarter. I mean, Carolina got outscored 17-zip in the fourth quarter.
Those are the things that, how many times have we been taught those things on the practice field, which is whenever you intercept the ball, take it to the house. Yep. Practice getting, block somebody. Get the ball to the near sideline. Those things that you hear defensive coaches yell all the time. Kansas City gets it. Eric Berry returns it for a touchdown. Marcus Peters at the end of the football game. How many times do people tell you, go after the football?
What a play.
You got him held up, tackle the football, pull it out.
Feel free not to punt it into the stands.
Well, that was a little bit. But
how is that only a 5-yard penalty?
That was the one thing when everybody went nuts. I knew it was only going to be a delay of game and a 5-yard penalty, so I knew it wasn't going to destroy them if it was a 15-yarder. Obviously, what are you thinking anyway by doing that? But what a great play to rip that ball out.
They made football plays that are harped on the practice field that unless you go to a practice and you hear coaches talk all the time about some of the things like the Chiefs do, you got to give Andy Reid his credit. I've heard the guy harp on these kind of things that won them the football game, stripping the football, getting a block on an interception. I've heard him talk about those things over and over, and yesterday those players carried that out in a tight football game the way it's always going to be for them.
The Panthers are doing something this year they didn't do last year, and that's making mistakes. It comes down to turnovers. They've committed 19 turnovers through 9 games. They committed 19 turnovers all of 2015. They're not taking care of the football, especially in the most important part of the game.
The Chiefs have 2 wins this season in games in which they've trailed by 17. The rest of the National Football League combined has 2 such wins.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And to your point, that penalty, didn't we have a guy lay down in the end zone?
Yeah.
He got a 15-yarder?
Yes.
And dude punts the ball into the stands and gets a delay.
I remember when I sat there, we screamed over there in the war room going, what? I mean, Marcus, man. Tremendous player, but come on now.
Doing? I don't understand where your head goes.
I'd love to have been on the headset to hear what the coaches were saying.
Because it's a brilliant play.
Oh, it
is.
It's
a brilliant play. You set
and he's a brilliant player.
And he punched the ball.
He's a brilliant player.
Amazing.
That was crazy. There were a lot of crazy moments in the NFL because I got to let Tommy go. Final thought. Anything you want around the entire National Football League?
I just thought it was very nice to see some quality games. And I've been a critic of the product for quite some time. And yesterday, my faith was restored, Golan.
Let me ask you one quick question before you go. This is something we get into later. Do you think the league will change the rule on field goals and extra points about jumping the center? With what happened with Denver, we've seen it a couple times now with the kid Justin Simmons, who I believe had a 40-inch vert.
Yeah, he can get up now.
Jumped over, and obviously that was the play of the game in the Denver Broncos win over an Orange. Do you think they outlaw that?
I think they do because it's a reactionary league. I would not change the rule, but something tells me they will in the offseason.
Yeah, I want to get into that a little more. I just wanted to get his thought because I knew he had to go because I think it's going to become more of a topic.
Yeah. Tommy's got to go. He's got to go talk Blackhawks this afternoon on ESPN.
Blackhawks and Bulls.
And Cutler.
Anything to avoid.
Cutler talking.
No.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Let's bring in Heather Dinich, our college football analyst, who will have the best answer. We can get to that. Heather, I think we all have a sense of what's going to happen at number 1. And then all bets are off. So after Alabama, Heather, as you study all the data and with your understanding of what the committee has done, what do you expect to be 2, 3, and 4 tomorrow night?
I think they go with Ohio State at number 2 because the Buckeyes won when everybody else lost, and they still have a really good resume. At number 3, I'm sticking with Michigan, guys. I think the committee might too because of their resume as well. They have a win against Colorado, a win against Penn State, a win against Wisconsin. That still matters. And then at number 3, I think they go with Clemson. And I say that because head-to-head matters. And they showed us that last week. When Texas A&M lost, they did not drop the Aggies behind Auburn, and committee chair Kirby Hocutt said the reason for that was because of the head-to-head result. So if they're consistent, which they haven't been, I'll give you that much, then I think that that's what they do with Louisville behind Clemson and Washington then behind Louisville because their strength of schedule is not very good.
And let me ask you this. But going into the weekend, we had said, listen, if the 4 undefeated stay undefeated and win their conference championships, it's going to be a no-brainer. But we knew that wouldn't happen. So 3 of those teams lost. So let me put it to you this way. If Clemson, Michigan, and Washington all take care of business the rest of the way and all win their conferences, which they still can, do you believe all 3 of those teams would still be in the Final Four with Alabama?
I think so, because I think right now the Big 12 is in a hole. I mean, we see where Oklahoma is ranked ahead of West Virginia. They have 2 losses. And Kirby Hocutt last week made it clear that West Virginia's strength of schedule hasn't impressed the committee. He said, look, the Mountaineers have played one team in our top 25, and they lost that game to Oklahoma State, so they clearly have work to do. But look, Washington, to me, guys, is the X factor. I would not write them off with a loss to a ranked USC team, but they've got no margin for error, and they're the one that's kind of debatable because their non-conference strength of schedule, I would call it Baylor-esque. They are 128 out of 128 with wins against Rutgers, Idaho, and Portland State. So to me, they're the one with the least margin for error.
Mike and Heather Dinich, you mentioned that the committee says, and we will throw in the caveat, they don't always say the same thing in consecutive weeks, but they say head-to-head matters. So let's just lay out the scenario because it's fun. If Ohio State beats Michigan and Penn State wins out, which they should, it will be Penn State that comes out of that half of the Big Ten, not Ohio State and not Michigan. So is there a scenario where Penn State winds up winning the Big Ten championship? They beat Ohio State during the season, but a one-loss Ohio State still winds up making the playoff ahead of them?
I don't think that a one-loss Ohio State would make it ahead of Penn State without winning the conference championship and considering that Ohio State's only loss was to Penn State. To me, that's comparable to Clemson and Louisville. You've got 2 strikes against you. You don't win the conference championship and you lose the head-to-head battle. Those are 2 parts of the selection committee's criteria. But I do think there's a possibility that a one-loss Ohio State can get in without winning the conference championship in addition to the Big Ten champion. And again, it goes back to Washington. Does Washington lose the Apple Cup? If it does, the Pac-12's out, and that opens the door for a crazy scenario.
All right, we've really basically got this around, Heather, 6 teams: Alabama, Clemson, Michigan, Washington, Ohio State, and Louisville. Who outside of that? Who's that team from the outside that could jump into this thing?
Well, I think you have to start with Wisconsin, a 2-loss team out of the Big Ten West. I mean, if they go through and win the Big Ten championship, their only losses are to the 2 best teams, in theory, and we'll see what Penn State does, in the East, to Ohio State and Michigan. I think they've got a great shot.
Hey, basketball fans, I'm Cassidy Hubbard. I'm the latest NBA Lockdown podcast. Me and Amin El-Hassan, along with producer Josh, discuss, is James Harden the real MVP this season? Are you a believer in him? Download the podcast.
Okay, so 2 things I want you to know about the college football. Louis Riddick in our studio, terrific as he is every Monday. 2 things that you should know. One of them is our analytics department puts this together. They go through absolutely everything. And so in advance of whatever it is the committee decides tomorrow night, these are the 4 teams that our analytics department believes should be the top 4. There are 4 teams that rank in the top 5 in the country in both strength of record and in FPI, meaning just what our analytics think are the best teams. And those teams in order are Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Louisville. Those are the 4 teams that our FPI is projecting should be the 4 teams tomorrow night. Now, the committee can do whatever it wants.
Sure.
But because of one little factor in all of this, and I don't know how closely people were paying attention to this over the weekend, if Ohio State beats Michigan, Penn State is going to win the Big Ten East.
Yep.
They just are. Their 2 remaining games are against Michigan State, who has only 1 win in the conference, and Rutgers, who, if they score a point in the conference, it's time to stop and celebrate.
Michigan State's win was over Rutgers.
Right. So, I mean, Michigan State they're just having a terrible year. I mean, we associate them with being a good team, and they will be again, but they're having a terrible year.
A bad year, right.
Oh, look, if Penn State loses that game, all of this changes. But this takes you back to what I said before the break. I strongly believe a non-conference champion is going to get in, and I believe that team is going to be Ohio State. I believe Ohio State is going to beat Michigan. And I think we're going to get to the end of the year, and the committee is going to have the following. A, for whatever this is worth, they're a brand, right? Ohio State is a brand. So if you're going to break ties anywhere, Ohio State is a major brand in college football. But let's even take that out of the conversation, okay? Their 1 loss is against a very good Penn State team. Where's Penn State right now? 11 or 12 in the current rankings. They're 10.
Penn State's 10.
And it was on a blocked field goal that got run back for a touchdown on the road. They have wins over Tulsa, who's good, Oklahoma, and that was a very one-sided game. They beat Wisconsin. They beat Nebraska and beat them into the ground. And in order for this to play itself out, they would also have to have beaten Michigan. So they will pass the eye test. Everyone is going to be looking at them saying they can play with anybody in the country. Lewis, your question, who can make Alabama sweat? Well, J.T. Barrett can. You're looking for a quarterback who can do it? Watch that kid play. He's not Lamar Jackson, but he's spectacularly good. I believe Ohio State, Mike, if they beat Michigan, will get in.
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, not just saying that it's going to happen. I still think that if those one-loss teams, well, forgetting Michigan, as I said, the one team would be Washington. That's what this all comes down to. Clemson, if they win the ACC, they're going to be in. And then your scenario throws a little monkey wrench into whether Washington gets in. That's going to be the question. If Washington can finish their season, they still have to play Washington State, which is a ranked team right now, and then they would have to play in the Pac-12 championship, and that side of it right now is controlled by Colorado, who has to play Washington State and Utah, by the way, before see if they can win that side of it. You know, and those are ranked teams as well. And then if Washington were to win the Pac-12 championship, I can't out of hand just say that's going to happen. I just can't do it.
See, I think if Wisconsin were to win the Big Ten championship under the scenario we've just described, I think Ohio State would get in ahead of them. They beat them head up. They're one loss that they're going to lose in this tiebreaker, scenario, this round robin tiebreaker scenario. They have better wins. I mean, I love Wisconsin. I believe if Wisconsin wins the Big Ten, they should get in.
Right.
But I don't know that they wouldn't put Ohio State in ahead of them.
That would be unbelievable. If you start getting teams that go in not even making the conference championship game. And I know, listen, the rule is...
That would be Louisville. If Louisville's going to get in, they're going to get in that way.
No, I know. That's my point. You're supposed to pick the four best, and not so much conference champions. But at the end of the day, I just think the conference, the committee, will put a lot on conference champions.
They could... If Ohio State played Washington right now on a neutral field, I think everyone – maybe we can ask somebody what the line would be on that game. I believe Ohio State would be favored. Not that should be the decisive factor.
Right.
Lewis, what do you think?
No, look. When you're looking at all this, and it's interesting, go with what you just said about conference champions, and I think context really is very important. I understand the quality of wins, quality of losses. The conference championship thing, I get there should be some weight put on the fact of whether or not you went through and won your conference. Mm-hmm. But I'm a big eye test and context type of person, and that's why I just keep coming back to Louisville. That's why I keep coming back to, and I'll even come back to Ohio State right now. Do I believe that Ohio State at the end of the day deserves to be in the playoffs here? Well, are they one of the top 4 teams in the country? Just watching them play, without a doubt. How they kind of – it'll be interesting to see how the committee really justifies getting in there, who they really believe to be when they watch the games, the 4 best teams. And, they'll be able to point to whatever statistical measures that they want to point to in order to get the 4 teams that they want.
Exactly.
They will justify it however they need to. And you know what? And quite honestly – maybe that's the way it does need to be.
But that's what happens when you put humans involved.
That's right. And maybe it does need to be that way because that's what this game is. Football is a highly subjective football game. A highly subjective sport.
Yeah. And Mike, you've loved Washington all the way through.
Yes.
I'm not telling you that you're wrong.
No.
But I'm just asking you, where's their win? Like, show me the teams they've beaten that you're so excited about. Their best wins are Stanford and Utah.
Yeah, listen, the Pac-12 is down this year. I mean, Oregon used to be one of the top teams in the country. They're down. Stanford used to be one of the top teams. They're down. I get it. This is in the cycle. It's a down conference. I completely understand that. I'm with you there.
The committee also loves to punish you for playing a bad non-conference schedule.
That was a horrible non-conference schedule.
Yeah.
Horrible non-conference schedule.
I'm just making a prediction. I'm not even telling you whether I think it's right or wrong. I actually think it's right. My prediction right now is that Ohio State, assuming they beat Michigan, now obviously if they lose to Michigan, all of this changes. If they beat Michigan, I believe Ohio State will get in, even without being in the Big Ten title game. That's my prediction.
Well, I mean, this is going to be an interesting scenario for the committee. And the tougher it is, the happier, I guess, I'll be to see what their criteria is. That being said, Lewis, I completely agree with you. They'll make the criteria what they need it to be.
In order to get the teams in there that they want.
What I'm would always be fascinated with is what they come up with and then take the teams we have now. We have the schedules. We can still, Hembo, correct me if I'm wrong, you could still use all the algorithms you want for the old BCS formula, right? And could you plug everything in? Now, probably not as far as the Harris poll, because the Harris poll was one part of the BCS that was a human poll. It was 115 people.
So plug the committee in that.
into all the other BCS ones and see. I'd love to see the comparison of what teams you came up with then.
By the way, given the hypothetical lines that Westgate Las Vegas gave us last week, it's safe to assume Ohio State would be about a touchdown favorite versus Washington on a neutral field. Don't get me wrong. That shouldn't be the decisive factor in all of this. Right. I'm just telling you, I believe if Ohio State beats Michigan, you look at the season they've had.
Well, I
cannot believe they don't.
I believe they should be in
Let me ask you this. Do you believe an Ohio State should get in over a Big Ten conference champ?
See, it's going to be very tough to do if it's Penn State because Penn State will have beaten them.
Exactly.
If it's Wisconsin, they will have beaten Wisconsin. I mean, it's a quirky thing the way it goes.
But watching that football game and watching Ohio State play and watching who Ohio State has beaten and watching Penn State play, regardless of how that game turned out head-to-head, they're a better football team than Penn State.
But you can't discount the fact that they played.
You're right.
No way
the
committee, if Penn State wins the Big Ten, would leave them out and put Ohio State in.
You're a bigger, stronger guy than I am, but if we had a fight and I won, it would be the upset of the millennium, but we can't discount it. Right? We can't be like, if they fought 10 more times, Lewis would win.
Well, does that mean that if we were having like a round-robin type of like fighting tournament here that you should get in instead of me because you got lucky and you sucker punched me and knocked me out?
But the obvious, you're right.
And you caught me right in the temple and knocked me out.
I blocked a field goal and ran it back for a touchdown. Yes, you're 100% right.
Which is what it would be, right?
But the argument against that, no, you're right. I'm not saying, listen.
In the temple.
Okay, can we, bad example. Okay, you want to hear me say I couldn't beat you in a fight. I grant you that, okay?
Actually, that wasn't my point.
I'm not.
No.
You're big, I'm small.
No, Grady, I love you, man.
That's not the point I'm making. Let me go back. Let's erase that I even brought that up. Here's what I'll say is the answer to your question is then why did we play the game in the first place?
Good point.
You know what I
mean?
I mean, if we played each other,
win them when
you
they're
won.
scheduled. You got to win them when they're scheduled. I get it.
So, but that's why I think they find a way to put Ohio State in anyway.
Yeah.
And maybe it would be, to answer your question, Golick, it might be ahead of Wisconsin. They would have a tough time putting them ahead of Penn State because they lost to Penn State. They beat Wisconsin.
I understand that. To me, there's no
Wisconsin
way.
would have 2 losses, including to Ohio State.
Yeah.
And Ohio State would only have 1 loss. So even though they played 1 extra game, which was the conference championship game, and they won it, and they won the conference championship for whatever you determine that to be, Ohio State, I think, would still be rated. Ohio State's going to be rated ahead of them now.
Yes, they are.
So nothing is going to change between now and then, except Wisconsin gets one additional game, and it happens to make them the conference champion.
Which there is some meaning to that.
Champion gets in ahead of a one-loss team that's actually, when you look at it, they're better.
That's correct, and they beat them when they played head up. Now, but I think that game went to overtime.
I hope the committee.
I think that was an overtime game, wasn't it? Ohio State, Wisconsin I'm talking about. That was overtime, yeah. So, I mean, it was as close can be. Yeah. Listen, this is the beauty of this.
Yeah, sure.
This is why college football is the best sport, because we can continue talking about this. All of us can have our opinions, and none of us are wrong yet.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Let's get into all the football, Mike, college and pro, with our buddy Brock Heward, who hosts Brock and Salk weekday morning, 7 a.m. Pacific on ESPN 710 Seattle, and, of course, does terrific work with, I believe he does the games with Wischusen every week.
Yes, yep.
On ABC and ESPN, including a really good one this week with Penn State and Indiana. What's up, Brock?
Hey, good morning. I just want to say before I get started, we gave you a little love. I don't know if you go back and watch the TV broadcast, but you were straight William Wallace, Greeny, when you were at Northwestern a couple weeks ago. You held up that sign, and the players running out. I texted Golick. It was one of the most impressive things. I think you downplay your physicality. You held that thing above your head as the players run on the field, and every one of them was banging it. And I thought for sure I would see a torn rotator. I thought your shoulder was going to give out. I mean, some of those guys whacked it, and you just stood strong, kind of horse, like Trent Dilfer horse stance. Man, you were really impressive. I wanted to come back to it on the broadcast, but the game was pretty good.
Yes, no, you're right. Obviously, everything you said is 100% right, Golick. I mean, anything you could add? There's really nothing to add.
Brock, what you don't know is he had to go to the hospital for an MRI after that.
That's not. But it came back. It came back with nothing. So obviously, I'm that kind of strong and tough. Okay, let's get to business here. I want to do a bunch of different things with you, Brock, and let's start with the professional football team that you guys cover on a regular basis, and that is the Seahawks, who have back-to-back primetime games. They win a tough one with Buffalo on Monday night, controversy with the kick and Sherman and everything else, then go across the country last night and do something that isn't easy to do, and that's beat Tom Brady in his house. What do we say about the Seahawks' place in the pecking order of pro football right now?
when Russell Wilson is healthy, they're as good as anybody. And I would go so far as to say when that dynamic is back and he can extend plays and he can get out of trouble and his legs at least make a defense think, and it can't be just one-dimensional and slam and stop the run and all that play pass comes to life. When Russell Wilson is healthy, they are an absolute Super Bowl competitor and combatant, and I think Russell is right in the heart of an MVP conversation as he was at the end of last season.
You know, a guy that's kind of, hasn't been around all year doing what he did last night, led the team in rushing and receiving. C.J. Prosise, what he can do carrying the ball, and what he did this at Notre Dame a lot as well, catching it out of the backfield. Talk about him for a bit. I mean, we know about Russell Wilson and how great he can be in that defense, but how about those other players that maybe a lot of people don't know about that are helping the cause?
It was their rookie class, Mike, last night that came to life as well, and they really needed it. Their first-round pick, Ifedi, struggled. He played his best game. Jaron Reed at D-tackle was a difference maker. They've loved C.J. Prosise. I mean, Pete has been enamored with him as any of their draft picks, and I'm not going to say Reggie Bush. He didn't have that kind of explosion collegiately, but he did in the diversity of his skill set, and they just wanted to see it. And the poor kid hurt his hamstring, he hurt his groin, he hurt his knee, he just could not get going, broke his wrist, and finally we were able kind of to see everything that Pete had talked about. And then, Thomas Rawls is going to be back more than likely this week or the following week, and you add his flavor with Prosise and a healthy Russell, you're going to be a very dangerous out here in the second half.
Brock Heward, who has Pete Carroll on his show every Monday on 710 ESPN Seattle, including today, is with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Choose Shell V-Power Nitro Plus premium gas for the best total engine protection you can get. Then we turn our attention to college, where we see you every Saturday, and I have here in the note, you've had Michigan this year, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Penn State twice, and Louisville. But it's a team you haven't had that I really want to get your take on, because you're out there in the state of Washington, in Seattle. Washington loses to what looked to me like a very good USC team the other night, but we've seen from the committee that they were already a little bit, mixed in their views on Washington. Not really a signature win, very bad non-conference schedule. Just how good a football team is Washington, and what do you think they're staring at right now coming off their first loss?
They're a top six team as I look at all of these teams and have a chance to scout them and watch the tape and get behind the scenes. They're, to me, one of the top six teams. They lost their best pass rusher. That hurt. They lost their middle linebacker and leading tackler, really their alpha in the middle. Their middle linebacker, Azim Victor. The pass rusher was Joe Mathis. Those two losses in that front seven have hurt them pretty significantly, and I don't know if they can win the next three without those two guys. If they were in the fold, it would have been a different game Saturday night against USC. I think it would be a different game down the stretch. They don't have them. And in year three, I don't know if they've got the elite kind of depth to just step right in these prime-time, huge, momentous games. But I still think they're one of the top six. And I would contend when you say no marquee win, let's remember Stanford was number 7 in the country when they came in. It started 2-0. It run all over everybody. And they didn't just beat them. They humiliated them. They injured them. And they lost a couple more to follow. They since have rebounded. Beat Notre Dame, sitting at 7-3. Going to Utah, winning at Utah against a top 15 team was a pretty significant win. And I heard you guys saying earlier, and I don't question it, but I think it's worth debate, is the Pac-12 is down. The Pac-12 is down. Well, is it down because Washington State, and Colorado, and Utah are up? And just because the teams that have been there before, Oregon and Stanford, if it was Oregon and Stanford in the position that Washington and Utah and Washington State were in, will we have that same perception of how down the conference was? Because I know Jim Harbaugh, if you were to ask him and say, who was one of the best teams you played this year, he would say it was Colorado, who was up on us in the second half before their starting quarterback went down. So just because there's new faces, Wazoo's playing as well as anybody. USC's playing as well as anybody. Colorado's playing as well as anybody. And on a neutral field, against anybody not named Alabama or Louisville or Ohio State, I think it'd be a pretty competitive and combative game.
It's a fair question about the team names from Oregon and Stanford to what we have now. How much do you put for a conference champ? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about right now. If Clemson wins the ACC, they're in. If Michigan wins the ACC or wins, they're in. If Ohio State beats Michigan and it's somebody else winning the Big Ten, does Ohio State maybe get in over a Washington Pac-12 championship team if they go on and win that?
It's a fascinating discussion, I would say, because it's the top of their priority list, and you go into these meetings and you've got to separate the emotion out of it. We did it a year ago. Chris Spielman and I were screaming at each other. We got to do a mock committee, and it was awesome to go into the room. You vote on the computers. We went back a number of years, so we didn't do it in the current year because we didn't have all the data, but we went back to a previous year where Boise State was really good, and Spielman and I are like spitting at each other, and Bill Hancock's like, okay, guys, this is a mock presentation. Let's just settle down, but you have to, as best you can, separate some emotion when you're in that moment, and like you do in business, and this is big business, huge business, and say, this is our criteria, right? I mean, we're not going to waver from this. We've got to have some benchmarks, and one of those, and the most important benchmark, is that you have got to be a conference champion, and that may be put to the test in ways that none of us envisioned before Saturday.
Yeah, that would be fascinating. Two thoughts. First off, Spielman is a fight I want no part of.
Yeah.
That's you're a big, tough guy, Brock. That's a fight I want no part of. Second, and more significantly, the conference champion thing, it seems to me, could break ties. But you may not be looking at ties. Now, you've done, what does it say on my list here? You've done Ohio State. I watch the Big Ten play every single week. Ohio State could wind up beating Michigan. They will have, in my opinion, as good a resume as anyone in the country, except for Alabama, because Alabama would be unbeaten. But I think they will have actually played better teams top to bottom than even Alabama has at the end. So if by a sort of a quirk, they don't wind up getting into their Big Ten championship game, whoever winds up winning the Big Ten championship game, I think will have a lesser resume than they do, which is why I say they're the one team that I think gets in no matter what.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. In having seen them, they're much better than I think on paper than Wisconsin, and they beat them, albeit in overtime. I think they're better, especially now with Penn State down 3 offensive tackles. They're playing with second and third stringers now, and their offensive line is beat up as that crew is. And if they were to face them on a neutral field or at the Horseshoe, I think it would be an incredibly different game. But it wasn't. It wasn't on a whiteout, and Penn State beat them head-to-head and got that win. But you're absolutely right. In this discussion, as you kind of play it forward here, Ohio State is going to, because of that loss to Penn State and what Penn State has left, and I think they're going to go undefeated and into that Big Ten championship game, and then it gets incredibly fascinating. It is the chaos that we have all clamored for the last few years, and I really believe we're going to get it here down the stretch, and this last Saturday was a big reason why, as 5 of the top 10 go down.
And you've also done Louisville, and now, in your mind, are we going too far on Louisville because of Lamar Jackson, or do you think this is who they've had some mediocre wins, but they're winning, and their only loss was a good loss, as they say, to Clemson? Are we talking about this team more because of Lamar Jackson giving them the benefit of the doubt? Do they deserve to be in that top 6 conversation?
Louisville, 100%. And Louisville is the most volatile team in college football, bar none. No debate about it. And I think it starts at the top. It starts with having over 20 transfers, either from other schools that booted players out or from junior college ranks. That's the way that Petrino has built his teams there at Louisville. He takes risks that others won't, and they are unbelievably volatile. They'll play down to Duke and to Wake Forest, and they will play up, and they better play up Thursday at Houston and play toe-to-toe in a final play against Clemson in Death Valley. They've got the best player in college football. And beyond that, Mike, I saw them at their absolute apex. NC State had Clemson beat the week before and was coming in feeling great, and it was 40-0 at half. And you saw the upside. I mean, they are an upside team, and Nick Saban would want no part of Lamar Jackson. He would want no part of that overall team speed, no part of the NFL nasty dudes they've got in their front 7. That is a volatile team, and when they put it together, they probably on paper and on tape, if you put the game tape on, when they put it together, they give Alabama the best test, in my opinion.
And so that would bring us to a final thought, because I know you got to run tape something here. If it comes down to the question of, do you put, when you're breaking ties at the end of this thing and you got to put teams in this thing, would you put more weight on who you've beaten or who you lost to? Which is to say, Louisville is going to wind up having probably the best loss of all the teams that we debate, but they're not going to have anywhere near the best wins. Which is more important?
Yeah, I would say who you beat. And especially down the stretch. And we better have learned something from Saturday before we just all of a sudden crown all these guys and they're going to roll and Penn State's going to win their final two and this is going to happen. We need to slow our roll because college football is different this year. There's Alabama clearly at the top, and then even Ohio State has played down to some competition, went into some overtime, is finding some of their footing as Urban Meyer typically always does in the month of November. But I'd be very, very careful counting this and slotting everybody in based on what we saw last weekend and what I have seen this entire college football year. Wisconsin, Penn State, Colorado, Washington State, Oklahoma's red hot. I mean, you put any of these teams in a neutral field environment, and it is a total toss-up and pick 'em. And that's the beauty of this college football season. And if we had chaos this last Saturday, we're going to have chaos moving forward. And that's why, and I love what Louis Riddick said. I was listening to you guys driving in this morning when he said, I got to have context, and I got to have that eye test, and I got to see what teams do down the stretch. And let's remember what Ohio State did getting in the playoff that first year. They just thrashed people down the stretch. And in our conversation of the Buckeyes, if they go in the horseshoe and at home and they thrash Michigan by 3 or 4 touchdowns, that will make a major impact on the decision-making process in that committee room.